My name is Leonard Koziansky. I'm an artist. This is my studio. Welcome to my studio. And I'd like to talk today about why individuals matter, why individual lives matter, and how this idea has been expressed by artists over the last several centuries, often in the creation of self-portraits. And so, in the Middle Ages, it was felt that the individual was not important, that our individual lives were unimportant, and artists especially were just seen as sort of like as servants who were there to just create these images that would be used in churches as objects of veneration. But they didn't sign their pictures. They weren't important. Individuals weren't important. Kings and queens were important. They were were endowed by God. They had the divine right to be treated with greater respect. They lived in bigger houses. They lived in castles. They ate better food. They had better clothes, while everyone else sort of suffered and scraped by. Well, about the Renaissance, about the time of the Renaissance, that attitude changed. But before we look at some Renaissance portraits, first, here's one of my paintings, and this is called The New Day. And it's a self-portrait. It's a portrait of my daily activity. And I get up every morning, I go for a run. And this is me during my morning run. If you look at the end of that long dock there, sticking out into the water, that's a self-portrait. But I'm placing myself in the context of the neighborhoods that I run through, that are filled with other people who are doing their individual things early in the morning, getting up, getting ready to go to work, eating breakfast, and their lives are just as important as mine. And so we are all important as individuals. But this is very different from the medieval idea where the peasants, their lives didn't matter. And they could be killed, slaughtered, whatever. It was the kings and queens, the knights, the dukes and the earls. They're the ones that mattered. And that attitude persisted all the way up through the Victorian era. But there I am at the end of the dock, facing the dawn sky. I go run to the end of the long dock down here in town and say the Lord's Prayer and then continue on with my morning run. And I did this in 2019. This painting was done by Albrecht Dürer, a German artist. And in this painting, he's a young man, a very good-looking young man, a successful young artist. His clothes, his hair, his pose all bespeak success. And he's sort of like elevating himself. He's expressing a certain amount of pride in who he is as an artist. And he's patterned this portrait after this painting by Hans Memling, which is a portrait of Jesus Christ giving his blessing. Notice that the hand gesture is very similar. But also notice that Hans Memling is bringing Jesus down to a human level. He doesn't have any of Jesus's divine attributes, like he's not holding an orb, and he doesn't wear a crown. And his hand is also resting on the edge of the frame of the picture. Sort of like he's in a window looking out, part of our world. But in this portrait by Dürer, notice that over there on the left is his signature, his monogram. And he's letting us know that he, the artist, Albrecht Dürer, created this painting. And he's also letting us know over there on the right that he's 28 years old. So he's saying, not only am I, Albrecht Dürer, important, but I, at the age of 28, am important. And here, 130 years later, this is an etching by Rembrandt. And here Rembrandt is a young man in his mid-20s. He's making faces. He's having fun. And he would go on to become a very successful portrait artist who made a lot of money. And he made a lot of money, but he spent a lot of money. And he bought fancy clothes and antiques and jewels. He got married. He had children. But later in life, his life was beset by tragedy. His wife died. Several of his children died. And because he was living beyond his means, he faced bankruptcy. They auctioned off all his possessions. He was kicked out of his house. He lost his studio. And so here he is in the late middle ages of life, facing financial ruin, personal tragedy, and yet notice that determined expression on his face. Even though he's troubled, even though he's anxious, he's still troubled. He's still very resilient and determined as an artist and as an individual. His individuality is important still in the face of all these difficulties. And here's a painting by the Spanish painter Diego Velasquez. And it's a portrait of a Spanish princess surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting. And ladies-in-waiting, they were minor nobility. They were like duchesses and countesses. They weren't really servants. They were just like her companions and her assistants. But notice, in this painting, Velasquez has painted himself over there on the left, painting this picture. And so, and his proportions are equal to the proportions of the children. So he's putting himself on the same level as these aristocrats. And also notice that in the back of the room is another mirror. So in order for him to be painting this self-portrait, he has to be looking in a mirror. But notice that at the back of that room is another mirror, and reflected in that mirror is the King and Queen of Spain. He's placing us in the company of a king and queen, and he's making us as important as they are. And even in our own Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson said, all men are created equal, and they are endowed by God with inalienable rights that are theirs just for being a human being, with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he wasn't thinking in terms of races when he was saying that. He was thinking in terms of aristocracy. And he was saying that everyone is equal. It didn't matter if you were a king or a queen or a commoner, everyone was equal, according to Thomas Jefferson and our own Declaration of Independence. And that's what Velasquez is expressing in this portrait, actually a combination of a portrait of a princess, king and queen, and himself. Now here is an icon of the tortured artist, the romantic ideal of the tortured artist, in this self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh. This was done in 1889. And, Van Gogh was a troubled soul. I mean, and we get a sense of that looking at this portrait, this self-portrait. If we look into his eyes are full of anxiety and trembling, and that background with those swirling lines, that adds to the anxiety and turbulence of this self-portrait that Van Gogh did a year before he killed himself. And, and he's living in a hospital, basically an insane asylum, while he's painting this. And he's saying that even though he's troubled, and even though his life is full of difficulty, and he's only sold one painting in his whole life, he's saying, I'm still an important person. I'm still an important individual. My individual life is important to me, important enough for me to make a portrait of myself at this time in life. Later on, after he died, his paintings, today, at auction, his paintings get more money than any other paintings that come up for auction. Well, here's a self-portrait by Grant Wood, done in 1941. Now, when we think of Grant Wood, we don't think of this as we don't think of this painting. When we think of Grant Wood, we think of this painting, American Gothic. And here, this is one of the most important American paintings, one of the most memorable paintings in American art history. And the inspiration for it was that house with the Gothic windows. And this is a portrait of a farmer and his daughter. And at the time it was painted in 1930, and he entered it in an art contest. It only came in third. And it was felt to be like a humorous poking of fun at the people of Iowa. But then, in the depths of the Depression, this painting became a symbol of the perseverance of the American pioneer spirit in the face of economic difficulties. This became a real symbol of American toughness, and it is that today. And this painting is celebrated not as making fun of Americans, but as showing Americans' sort of steely spirit. And this was painted in 1930. And here, this is America's most beloved artist. This is Norman Rockwell. And this is a triple self-portrait. His back is to us, and he's looking in the mirror. We see his face in the mirror, and his face is a little bit drawn, a little emaciated. He's older. But notice that the painting on the easel is much more idealized. And he's looking at us. We can see his eyes. We can't see his eyes in the mirror, and his back's to us in the painting. But notice in that painting on the easel, not only do we see his face looking at us, but his signature there in the lower right. And even though Norman Rockwell's, this painting was done for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, and even though so many of his paintings are very sentimental and sweet, I think this painting is very important because it's expressing the idea that not only is he, Norman Rockwell, an important individual, but that his creations are important as an extension of himself. His paintings are just as important as he is. And I think that is why this portrait, this self-portrait, is not only a painting of him, but of his artwork and him making his artwork and saying that his painting and his paintings are very important as individual expressions. Now here, 6 years later, see, that one was done in 1960. This was done in 1966. This is a self-portrait by Andy Warhol. And, here we have 6 portraits. And Andy Warhol is taking one photograph and repeating it several times. And he's using the silkscreen process, which was a commercial process used to create billboards and advertisements. And so he's expressing this blend of advertising and celebrity culture and art. And he's also letting us know that as individuals in the 1960s, we were all very conformist. We all ate Campbell's soup. He painted Campbell's soup cans. We all drank the same sodas, drove the same kind of cars, lived in the same kind of houses. And so he's making sort of an ironic comment on American culture as sort of a conformist culture. But notice that he's also saying that even though we may be all alike, we're all still very different. Each one of those portraits has a different color scheme. Each one is a little different. They're all alike, but they're all different at the same time. And so this is a different idea of individuality in the mid-1960s. And here, this is a painting done about 10 years later by Francis Bacon. And it's a very expressive painting. He was very well known for his unusual style of painting. And not only is he making himself important, but he's also saying that his peculiarities as a person are important too. And he's expressing that. He's saying, not just me, but my individual hang-ups and the warped things that I think or feel, they're important too. And that's quite a bit of a change from the Middle Ages, when your individuality, your individual feelings, your individual expressions were totally unimportant. It was just your role as a craftsman that mattered. Here Bacon is saying pretty much just the opposite. Well, I'm not a portrait artist, but I have done some portraits. This is one of mine. I did one of my students. And in this painting, I am expressing this person's individuality. But I'm also saying that they're sort of trapped by circumstances. And, they're sort of trapped by their environment. Those brittle branches. She is very, very beautiful, and her skin is very smooth. But those branches that surround her are sort of like very rough and sharp, but she seems to be sort of trapped by them. And so there's a real contrast between those two. But it sort of emphasizes her individuality, her individual personality by contrast with those rough, difficult branches that surround her. But here I am. That's a self-portrait of me at the end of the city dock facing the dawn sky. And I'm part of this larger world of individuals that are waking up in the morning and each doing their individual things. And I'm saying that they're important too. And, St. Paul said that, it didn't matter whether we were rich or poor, man or woman, or free or slave. We were all equal in the eyes of God, and those are the eyes that mattered. And so I'm saying that in this painting as well, that we are all important. You are important. You who are watching this video, you're just as important as any artist. You're just as important as the President of the United States or any king or queen. Your individuality, your individual life is just as important as anyone else's. And we are all equal. Thomas Jefferson said in our Declaration of Independence, we are all equal. But there are a lot of people these days that would like to push us back into this medieval mindset. And this painting is by Cimabue from 1287. And here, the artist was just a craftsman, and he was just making icons to be displayed and prayed to in a church. There are people who are trying to tell us now that our individuality is not important. That if we don't belong to their nation or their religion, then we're less than human, and they can kill us with impunity. And we say, no, my individual life is important. And that idea has been expressed by artists over the last several centuries, often in their self-portraits. Well, thank you for watching this video. And, if you haven't, please subscribe. And if there's some person that you know who needs to have their individuality reaffirmed, well, pass this along to them. Okay? And if you wouldn't mind, leave a comment. I read and answer all the comments. But thanks for watching this video.
If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and share.
And don't forget to ring the bell.